Right, good afternoon. Happy New Year to all. A warm welcome on behalf of the Singapore College of Insurance. My name is Perry Tan, and I'm your MC for today. Today we are having this webinar on reinsurance quality data submissions. Darren, can we have the slides, please? Thank you. Right. As you can see from the slides, today's title of this webinar, kindly brought to you by SCI in conjunction with Supersede, is improving reinsurance submissions through data quality and consistency, practical steps towards alignment and transparency. Let me just briefly introduce our speaker for today. Our speaker for today is Tom Spear, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Supersede. Supersede runs a reinsurance platform commonly used by cedants, brokers, and reinsurers to prepare submissions and structure placements. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just a synopsis of today's webinar. Basically, we're going to talk about data and basically we're going to explore how insurers and reinsurers can enhance the quality, structure, and transparency of data used in reinsurance submissions. And no doubt Tom will give you better insights into this topic. But before we start the webinar, there are some courses that you may be interested. We have just launched our 2026 technical training calendar. We have, well, this course on AI Essentials has already been sold out, but we are running another intake on the 21st of April. More details will come out on the AI course. And you can see other reinsurance courses shown here. Next slide, please. Right, so some more reinsurance courses that you may be interested in. If you need any help or inquiries on these courses, please just let us know. You can drop a message in the chat box whenever you feel like it. Okay. All right. So without much further ado, let me just hand it over to the speaker for today. We welcome Tom Spear of Supersede. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Harry, and good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here. Drop this in. So thanks very much for joining. Today, we're going to talk about reinsurance submission data, but probably not in the usual way that you've heard, not as an admin problem, not as a systems problem. We're going to talk about it as a commercial and financial lever, because what we see again and again is the quality of submission data directly affects how fast deals move, how confident reinsurers feel, and how clean things look kind of months or years later when finance and claims get involved. I'm Tom Spire, Chief Commercial Officer at Supersede, and my job is to spend time with cedants, brokers, and reinsurers, trying to turn messy data into clear decision-making material. So I want to start with a very simple idea. Data is not admin, data is leverage. Better submission data doesn't just make things easier to process, it changes placement decisions. It changes how many questions reinsurers ask, it changes how conservative they need to be, and it changes how much confidence internal teams have in the outcome. So today we're going to cover four things: where data breaks down, why underwriting and finance so often misalign, what good actually looks like in practice, and some practical steps that you can start without ripping out every system that you own. This matters now more than it did 5 or 10 years ago. First of all, capital and governance. There's far more scrutiny on recoveries, on structures, and on whether reinsurance kind of really does what it says on the tin. Second, operational reality. Legacy systems are still everywhere. Spreadsheets are still everywhere. Manual rekeying is still everywhere. And third, market pressure. Turnaround expectations are faster and tolerance for ambiguity is much lower. The key point is this: if the submission is unclear, every downstream step becomes slower and riskier. Uh, so before we go further, let's make this real. It's a quick poll across the group. So how is submission data primarily handled in your organization today? So we have mostly spreadsheets, a mix of systems and spreadsheets, dedicated reinsurance systems, or kind of you're not sure. There's no judgment here, by the way. We see all of these every day. So we'll just let that poll run. And we start to see some results here. A majority of the room using a mix of systems and spreadsheets with kind of mostly spreadsheets sitting behind that. So not much coverage of dedicated reinsurance systems or kind of dedicated software to solve with this problem. So we'll jump on. This slide kind of shows a pattern that we see across different regions and different organizations. Underwriting data is created, it gets shaped in spreadsheets, it's turned into a broker submission pack, reinsurers review it, finance and accounting then try and work with it. Between each of these steps, something happens. Rekeying, reformatting, interpretation. Every handoff in this process is a chance for data to change without anybody noticing. And importantly, nobody is trying to break it. It just happens because the process is so fragmented. We talk a lot about better data, which can sound a bit abstract. So let me show you what some structured submission data actually looks like in practice here. So you can see very clear, defined sections of data validated within different exhibits, clear overviews and metrics that we can break down. The important part there isn't the tool that was being used. It's that the data that we showed is structured, readable, and reusable from the start. So we'll run another quick poll just to get some feedback on where you guys see the biggest friction today. Whether that's in the underwriting to broker handoff, whether that's the broker to reinsurer questions coming back, whether that's underwriting to finance and the alignment there, or whether kind of claims and accounting after the event really cause the pain. That helps us understand kind of where this pain really sits across the life cycle at that run. And we see a pretty even split, to be honest. So that's very common that we see these breakdowns happen right throughout the process that it happens. Maybe a little bit more frustration around broker reinsurer questions and some of the breakdowns there. And then finally with that claims and accounting reconciliation. So this is probably one of the most important slides that we're going to go through today. Uh, Underwriting and finance are not fighting over data because they want different things. They're optimizing for different outcomes. So underwriting is trying to place the right cover quickly. They need kind of a clear story, consistent exposure, clean structure. And finance is trying to report accurately, settle cleanly, stand up to audit. They need precise fields, traceability, structure that they can rely on. So when data's weak, underwriting gets kind of more questions, slower quotes. Finance gets reconciliation issues, disputes, and leakage. So what we're really trying to say here is that this is a structural problem. It's not caused by people. It's not caused by ill will. Everybody is trying to do the right thing by their organization. So underwriting and finance functions are not asking for different data. They're asking for the same data. They're just asking for it to be structured in a way that works for them. So we'll show you what that looks like in practice. Um, so this is a simple treaty structure with some accounting information that's kind of derived out from it automatically. What that means is that we can use the same underlying data set and just reposition it in a different way and show different views of that same data for the different functions. And it means different functions get the exact information they need out and the same context. So same data, fewer interpretations. That's what we need to be aiming towards. When submission data isn't right, the cost of that kind of starts to show up in four main places. So first of all, that's in slower placements. So more back and forth always means longer timelines, things like that. Second is a weaker negotiating position. Unclear data leads reinsurers to make really conservative assumptions about what they're seeing. Third, financial inaccuracies. So bad structure can lead to allocation errors, different finance outcomes. And finally, kind of disputes and leakage. So problems that could show up months or years later when they're really, really difficult to fix at their hardest. Let's make this concrete with a real example. This is a global insurer that we worked with. Before we worked with them, they had regional templates. So each region of the company was using a completely different data template to work with. The fields in their core systems were named differently across the different functional teams. So data had to be manually rekeyed into finance systems. And what that meant that was in their reinsurance submission, every single reinsurer that they worked with came back with a host of clarification questions in every submission that they created and they put out into the market. So what we really focused on with them was creating one single canonical submission structure that they could work with, that they could use across the regions, that could be used internally across different functions, so that could be standardized and ingested immediately by reinsurers. We actually, as part of the submission, shared definitions for some of the key fields that were being used in that submission, which gave reinsurers kind of confidence over what the numbers really meant and what the calculations were trying to do for them. We made sure that there was less data transformation between steps, and where there have been elements of data transformation, we made sure that it was very, very clear there was an audit trail that sat in that process so that you could see the context of why data was transformed from one form to another, or why figures were outlined the way that they were. And finally, we made sure that there was a really clear handoff to the finance team, and that the context of why each piece of reinsurance was being bought was also being passed over to finance and accounting teams, rather than just kind of throwing a finished contract over the fence without any context. And that meant that there was fewer errors. The outcomes were faster reinsurer responses, fewer data-driven queries. And it wasn't because anyone worked harder on it. It was just because the data worked better for those teams. So another example here, often when we get feedback from reinsurers on work that we've done with cedents, with brokers, we hear this exact sentence. When we trust the data, we can respond faster and with fewer caveats. In this particular case, we were able to generate, less. People were spending less time clarifying exposures and structure. It meant that pricing ranges were much tighter from very, very early in the renewal period, which particularly this year was a real challenge to get over. And people were much more confident around their internal sign-offs. So, where reinsurance renewals can sometimes be very, very time limited, and people really struggle to get things done and take control of timings. You want to be able to use those timings to your negotiation advantage, and being able to do things internally very, very quickly allows you to take control of that timing. So if you want to delay putting a submission out to market, you absolutely can. But if your internal processes take so long that you're always going to be late, then you lose that element of control. You don't have the option of pushing data out early, or being able to take advantage of different pricing trends as they happen through a renewal period. So we didn't see the appetite of reinsurers change as a result. It was simply that we were able to get transparent data out really, really quickly, and that actually improved kind of pricing and placement outcomes for that client. One reason that kind of placements slow down today, it is fairly simple. It's that people, particularly reinsurance underwriters, reinsurance pricing actuaries, don't trust what they can't kind of clearly see. So we'll show you what that looks like. Kind of transparent data looks like here. This is a simple cat Excel structure. And again, the nuance of this reinsurance contract can be broken down into a series of very standardized fields that make it very explicit what the cover is, and how that cover operates, how payments are made, how recoveries are expected. So if you can provide more clarity around what your order is and what you're buying, and overlay that on top of a real clear canonical data structure, Then that clarity reduces friction, which increases confidence, and confidence reduces kind of the delays and eventually improves the placement outcomes that you'll see from that. So based on that, I'd love to get just another kind of final read from the room on what would improve these outcomes most in your organization. So we have here four options. And Darian, I don't know if we can bring this poll up here, but the options are faster placements, better pricing, confidence, reduced number of disputes and leakage, and improved governance and reporting. And we can see some results here. So again, a fairly even split. So we can see, that there are problems across the board recognized by the audience here. Confidence in pricing is coming out as one of the key areas, and that's really good that that's being recognized. I think it's often very tempting and very easy to link kind of efficiencies and systems to do with reinsurance, whether that's during the placement process, whether that's during a submission process, or whether that's during an accounting and settlement process down the track, and just link that to operational efficiency. That's going to help us be more efficient. That's going to save us some time. That's going to make things easier on the teams that we've got. That's going to allow the teams that we've got to concentrate on more important things. It's really important that we can also link those efficiency improvements to the pricing outcomes that you'll see as a result of them. So if we can be more confident in the data, if we can be clearer in the reinsurance that we're buying, then that gives us much more clarity, much more certainty around our organization's protections, and of course, gives us more confidence in what we're buying as well. So really glad that the audience is coming out with that. I'd like to kind of now finish up with five really practical steps that organizations can take. And nothing here requires a multi-year transformation effort or a brand new system implementation or anything like that. So firstly, go away in your organizations, agree a single submission structure that underwriting and finance can both sign off on. Find a data structure that's going to work for reinsurance submissions and is going to give every part of your organization confidence that the information that they're giving has the right context that it's sent through. The second step is to standardize kind of key fields and definitions, especially anything that relates to exposure, limits, attachments, contract terms, that kind of thing. If you're sending over data that's directly related to a variable of a reinsurance contract that you're buying, like make sure it's defined. You can bet your bottom dollar that the reinsurers that you're working with have a strict definition. And if there's variance in that definition, they're going to want to see that. So it's really important that you can standardize those and you can provide the definitions of them. And ideally provide the definitions of them upfront in advance. Third, reduce rekeying. So every single time you introduce a manual step or an element of rekeying, or you move data from one system to another without using APIs and systems and kind of tech-driven solutions, there's a risk, and that risk gets multiplied from every manual step that you introduce in that process. So anything that you can do to reduce the number of points at which things move between systems, the lower that risk will be for you. Fourth is once you've picked your structure and everybody internally has agreed with it, and you have one structure that your underwriters are happy with, finance are happy with, reinsurance placement teams are happy with, don't move it. Keep that structure, preserve that structure right the way through the placement process and into your post placement processing. Um, if you start to flatten things into static documents throughout the process, then um, the advantages that you get from your canonical submission structure start to degrade. So it's really, really important that you can do that. And fifth and finally, build traceability into the way that you move data from one point to another. Um, every single figure, if you make any kind of data transformation over the course of a question that you're asked by reinsurers, over the course of brokers providing more clarity to a data set so that they can tell a better story for you. Um, you need to be able to explain that. Like you need to be prepared for changes in numbers and changes in the way things being described to be audited. Um, this seems like a lot, and what we normally recommend with companies is that they find those 10 or 15 critical fields to do with limits, exposures, attachments, kind of key contract terms for the reinsurance contracts that they're buying, and start with those. So just improve those, create the kind of traceability around those, and then you can expand from there as well. So to close this session off for the group, we have three main takeaways really. Submission data quality drives placement outcomes. It's not there for efficiency. It's not there to make people easier. Genuinely, people with clearer, more transparent data get better placement outcomes from reinsurers. So it's important. Pay attention to it. Take care of it. Um, Secondly, if there's misalignment between underwriting and finance, between placement teams and finance teams, that creates delays, disputes. That's where leakage comes from. A lot of people think that reinsurance claims leakage is driven by systems that can't tell when an insurance claim should be covered by a reinsurance treaty. Actually, from our experience, that isn't true. What we find is that most of the leakage due to reinsurance claims is because the finance and accounting teams don't have a contextual understanding of the reinsurance that's been bought and how that should operate and why it was purchased in the first place. And that clarity of understanding and that alignment will really start to pay dividends as you reduce claims leakage from that. And finally, you don't need to replace every system that you've got. You don't need a new policy admin system, claims admin system. You don't need kind of advanced end-to-end platforms. You can do that by inserting very, very simple tools that can be deployed very, very quickly into your organization. Um, so hopefully those were the takeaways that people took. Thank you very much for the time and for being here this afternoon. Um, I'd love to open it up to any questions that we have. And of course,
Yeah.
I know Perry and the team
Yes.
SCI normally send around slides.
Yes, we
Yeah,
will
so
send the slides to all the participants and a copy of the video of the webinar, the link to the video recording of this webinar after this event. But we do have questions. We have one question from a gentleman, Mr. Andrew Harris. His question is, how do cedant insurers know the preferred data format preferred by reinsurers in order to secure the best outcome? Tom, but you'd like to take that question?
yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew. I think when I don't think that your question had two parts, and I'm not sure they're necessarily the same thing. So reinsurers have preferred data formats and preferred ways of thinking about data. They absolutely do. When we went out and built our product for the first time, we interviewed just under 2,000 pricing actuaries, reinsurance pricing actuaries from all over the market. And we asked them a single question. We asked them uh, if we could do something in this submission to make you take it from the bottom of the pile of submissions on your desk and put it on the top and process it faster, what would that be? And it wasn't necessarily the format of the data that came out as a result of that. It was really about the clarity of where that data comes from and what it means. Um, so when we say something as simple as net premium, a real clear understanding of what we mean by that. So what is it net of exactly? Um, if you can have standardized definitions of things, really, really simple terms like net premium, actually, that's the thing that gives reinsurers confidence. And if they don't understand what something that you call net premium is net of, then of course a reinsurance pricing actuary is going to make the worst possible assumption that they can. They're going to assume that there's astronomic acquisition costs that are baked into this, and there's further netting down of this premium that needs to happen. And those are the assumptions that they're going to go in and price on. And if you can be really clear about that, then that's how you optimize the outcomes. So try not to fixate on it's this format or it's that format or this is the way we want to display it. Really concentrate on how we can be transparent about what the numbers mean.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your Andrew's question. I've got a question of my own, perhaps, Tom. Where do data breakdowns most commonly occur in the reinsurance submission process? And which ones have the greatest impact on pricing and capacity decisions?
Yeah. So most common breakdown by far is the cedant broker interaction and what happens there. So quite often cedants collect together data. Quite often the data that they collect together isn't collected with the context of what that data is going to be used for. So they don't go around to all of their different underwriting units within the organization and say, "Hey, we're looking to buy some reinsurance. This is what we're trying to buy. This is why we're trying to buy it, and this is the story that we're trying to tell from it." So no context is provided. They just say, "Can I have lost data between these years for these lines of business with these caveats or this filter applied to it?" And then it's handed over to the broker often as it comes out of the system. And the broker is expected to tell this story that the people who provided the data haven't given any context over. Um, and it's actually quite rare that cedents and brokers will really collaborate on telling that story and on formulating that data pack. And that's because there's kind of fragmented spreadsheets that are used. The data, the broker has one version of the data, and they'll be doing transformations on that. Rightly so they can tell the best possible story for their cedant and send that out to market. But the cedant's not getting the context of what's being changed and why and how that data is being transformed. And so that misalignment then causes questions from reinsurers. And then when those questions are answered, because the broker cedant data creation what wasn't fully aligned, um, those questions create more uncertainty with reinsurers, and you actually compound the kind of negative pricing impact of having that misalignment. So that's most common, and that probably has the largest and outsized effect as well.
Okay, and we really encourage as questions as far as possible. So if any of you have any questions for Tom, please just type it into the Q&A box. Basically, now the thing is this, my next question is, with how does poor or inconsistent submission data lead to misalignment between underwriting and finance, particularly around recoveries and capital oversight? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so the data that we're talking about here is not the submission data itself. It's really the data around what's covered under the contract. So the reinsurance contract coverage information itself. If if the team that buys that, we've said underwriting in this session quite a lot as kind of the team that buys reinsurance. It might be a dedicated outwards reinsurance purchasing team. It might be quite a sophisticated individual department. Um, but they have kind of maximum context of what they're buying, why they're buying it, what the impact of that is going to be on the organization. They're often having conversations with the chief executive, the chief risk officer at the organization, to make tweaks to the fine terms and conditions and little details that are going to get the best protection possible for the organization. So they have maximum context there. Um, what usually happens in this kind of siloed approach that most companies operate under at the moment is they then go out and place that with all the context. The reinsurers understand why they're issuing the cover that they're issuing. The brokers understand what they're doing and how that contextually operates. And then they try and codify it in a document, a slip, an evidence of cover that's created. And that document is simply handed over into finance and accounting teams. And the finance and accounting teams just receive a document and they have to try and infer what the context of that purchase was. And that's really, really difficult. That's nearly impossible, actually, is to understand that. So they've created systems. Many people have systems. Many people have spreadsheets that they use, and they try and transfer what's in that document into a system and create, as they do so, they create their own context. But that isn't the same context as the people that actually bought the thing have to it. So what we're saying is you can completely eliminate that misalignment by having a shared view of what's being bought and have the broker operate on the same system, see the same information as the buying team, as the finance team, and then everybody has that context of what's being bought. Everyone understands why it's been bought, what it's meant to cover, and then you don't get that leakage out of the other end.
Okay, I've got one final question, if there are no more questions from the floor, but I do encourage questions to come in. With legacy systems and manual rekeying still widespread, Tom, what do you think that organizations can do now to improve their submission data quality without a major system change?
Yeah, it doesn't require a big system change, to be honest. We know that reinsurance departments are cost centers within their organization. You know, they're not going to attract massive investment in systems overhaul. It also it's a tough sell for an organization to say, you know, we want to make this big investment in reinsurance processing, and it's not really going to touch our underwriting operation. It's not really going to touch you know, the vast majority of the staff or the processes in this organization. It can be kind of seen as quite niche as an area. Um, so you don't need to do it like that. There are, you know, very simple online systems superseded one of them that can just be plugged in and launched within a couple of weeks, that can suck data out of other systems, that can API data kind of in and out and move data around all existing legacy systems, and make sure that can be kind of straight through process. We're not the only one. The platform is not important here. What's important is that there's a lot of very small modern technology that you can insert into processes that will make a tangible difference that you can roll out in 3 or 4 weeks, that doesn't represent a big transformation project.
Okay, one question just come in from Habib Ahmed. There's a difference between the underwriting book premium and the broker's expectant premium. How can this be resolved? What are the easy ways to comply for future payments?
Um, so I'm assuming Habib put another question in the comments if this isn't right. That this is really about, you know, after the event. So as we're doing our accounting process, you know, it transpires that the premium actual numbers that are coming through are not what we expected, and we're starting to lose the context. And so an explanation needs to be provided at renewal. Sometimes it can be difficult to reconcile what that premium should be. Now, this is exactly one of the problems that's caused by the loss of that context between silos. So if your accounting team realizes or knows from the very beginning, we bought this contract in order to protect us against X, Y, and Z on the assumption that our underwriting strategy is going to change in A, B, and C way. Then the finance team know in advance if that underwriting strategy fails to materialize, if that underwriting strategy is delayed, if that underwriting strategy doesn't go to plan, then we are to expect that reinsurance contract to operate in a different way. And it won't be a surprise because the context is there. The accounting and finance teams have access to the narratives that are used when the contract was originally purchased. So they understand that. They can expect those changes that come in. Without that, it's a completely unexpected change. You're saying, you know, we bought this contract and this is how it's meant to operate, and this is the prediction, the estimated premium income that we've given our reinsurance partners, and that's not come true. Do we look like liars? You know, because they don't have any context, they're not able to provide those explanations. They're not able to have confidence in the decisions that they're making, and they're not able to effectively, you know, process that business in a way that protects the balance sheet of the organization.
Yes, and another question from Nurul Ayn Abdullah. In your opinion, our submission should be short and simple, or we should include every details for transparency.
They should be transparent and simple. So it's not a case of more information is better. It's just not as simple as that. If it's really important that we are transparent, and what I mean by transparency specifically is providing the context behind the numbers. If we provide a set of numbers and we haven't defined how those numbers were created, if we run a data transformation from one view to another, and we haven't detailed the exact assumptions that we've made in providing that data transposition, then that lacks transparency. If if we provide, even something as simple as a limit profile diagram, if we provide a limit profile to somebody, then we want to know, is this limit profile derived, before or after we've applied aggregation because of stacking? Is it before or after we've recombined policies that are split out across different entities for underwriting reasons? Are our limits subject to any filters? Have we filtered out any business that we're perhaps not writing anymore? If you're not really transparent about those moves, like a pricing actuary 100% of the time will make the worst possible assumption that they can. They're going to assume that this data is so much worse than it is. And that worst case scenario assumption, even if the truth is bad, is going to be worse than the truth 100% of the time. We've never had a case where the truth, even if it's bad, is worse than the assumptions that a reinsurance underwriter is making when they're looking at that data, and they don't see the context and the transparency. That does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that you should just fire all of your data, just flood them with it, because that's just as confusing. If there's no context, if there's no um, clear instructions or transparent analysis of where this data comes from, then what's a pricing actuary meant to do with that? Like, often flooding reinsurance markets with data means that they have multiple versions of the same number that it could mean, and they don't really have any context as to what to do with that. The context provides the transparency, and the transparency provides the improved placement outcomes. So it's not more data, it's better data, clearer data, more transparent data.
Okay, another question just came in. From the perspective of reinsurance purchasing team, what are the effective ways to persuade senior management to adopt more transparency in our reinsurance purchasing programs?
Show them the outcomes. Um, Listen, reinsurance purchasing is one of the most powerful levers that an organization has to affect its core ratios. Um, if you're trying to improve your expense ratio, really easy and simple way to do that: buy less reinsurance. Uh, of course, what that means is that your book is more volatile if you do that. Um, if you most of your ratios that you'll be reporting to shareholders or to an executive are net of reinsurance. So every single piece of reinsurance that you buy has an effect on both sides of the ratio. So there's a double effect of everything that you do. The department is the most important department in the company that handles the single biggest line item on that balance sheet. Um, and if if you can make even a small improvement on the pricing outcomes that you have, if you can gain a market advantage over your competitors in, the outcomes of your reinsurance purchasing, then that has an outsized effect on your results and your competitiveness in your sector. So it should be very easy to make the case for more transparency generally. I understand that it can often be difficult to get budget for tools to improve things and stuff like that. We help with that every day. What we do as an organization is we help companies run kind of proof of concept activities, really small, isolated proof of concepts that we can use to derive what the business value is from doing this little bit of transformation, and what those end result pricing outcomes are, and therefore what the results are on those core ratios that your business is tracking. So happy to have a conversation offline, around how you can make the case for that specifically with your numbers, but generally speaking, the outcomes can speak for themselves if you can follow the maths through.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. I think there are no more questions left. And thank you for all for posing these questions that you have. This has been the first webinar that SCI has done for 2026, and we're off to such a fantastic start. Thank you, Tom, for all your valuable insights. And I will call this webinar to a close. But when you exit the Zoom session, you will see a evaluation. I'll encourage everybody to fill in the evaluation because your feedback and suggestions will be so important to us to plan for other webinars for this year. Thank you. Have a good evening. And for you, Tom, good morning. Have a good rest of the week. Huh? Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.